Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Lunch Update, our program to help you stay curious, connected, and informed, all live in real time. This conversation and all of our Lunch Update programs are made possible by our presenting sponsor, Perkins Coie, with an additional thank you to our Accelerate sponsors, Baker Tilly and Easy Office Products. Today's program will feature a conversation with Superintendent of Madison Schools, Dr. Joe Gothard. But first, here are a few chamber updates. In case you have missed it, we officially sold out our 11th annual Icebreaker at the Kohl Center on April 23rd. But for more information on theme and speakers for this year's event, which is presented by the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, also known as WARF, stay tuned by visiting madisonbiz.com or looking at the Beam newsletter. You can also add your name to the wait list. You'll see it in the chat now. Although it's unlikely that a lot of seats will come available, and there are quite a few names on the wait list, I would still encourage you. You just never know what might happen to get you off the wait list. And so if you missed it, despite us saying for weeks on end, it will sell out. We'd still love to have you. And the information that we will share, we will make public throughout our communication efforts after the event. So even if you miss it, it's a good reminder to focus on getting in for annual dinner and the next year's Icebreaker. Also, you should save the date for Advocacy in the AM on May 7th. So again, on May 7th from 8 to 10 a.m. at the Edgewater Hotel. I think we're going to have a fantastic panel, not just because I'm on it, but Dane County Executive Melissa Agard, Milwaukee County Executive David Crawley, and then my counterpart from MMAC, which is the Milwaukee Region Chamber, President Dale Quenga. And myself will have a conversation about how Madison and Milwaukee work together and benefit from this moment of sort of historic opportunity across Wisconsin and in the country, beyond just some of the things that you know today. So I would encourage you to come join us for breakfast and for what will be a great conversation on May 7th. Registration has not opened yet, but save the date, and within the next few days, registration will be open. Early voting is underway around Wisconsin, so regardless of where you live and you're tuning in, early registration is open now for the state Supreme Court race, certainly locally, Dane County Executive races on the ballot, and all 20 Madison Common Council seats are on the ballot as well, and then individual cities, towns, villages all have other things on the ballot. So you can early vote now. We recently hosted a group of business leaders and partner organizations, related and affiliated affinity groups, and candidates for local office at Merchant Madison. The purpose of that event was to enhance connectivity and celebrate our endorsed candidates. You can find a list of those endorsed candidates in the chat, and then increase involvement in the Chamber's direct givers conduit, which is a way for us to multiply the giving that you do for political campaigns, and help amplify your message and our collective message through the chamber. So through our conduit, you can contribute to Wisconsin political candidates of your choice while communicating your support as well for the chamber's broader efforts. These contributions are then sent directly to the candidates, and they're accompanied by a letter identifying that it comes from the chamber conduit. So you get credit, the chamber gets credit, but it's the same amount of money that you would have spent or sent otherwise. Account holders that we have quite a few, value the convenience of having the ability just to call us and say, deploy the resources in this direction for this purposes. That's one of the big advantages of the conduit. And then we know from the candidate's perspective, they certainly appreciate the support, but they also love the transparency of where it comes from and the ability to identify sort of collective interest. If you'd like to learn more about that, you can also look in the chat. There's a 2-pager about how the conduit works, and we would love to have you participate. And now for our guest. Dr. Joe Gothard was appointed Superintendent of the Madison Metropolitan School District on February 2024. Dr. Gothard is an MMSD alum who launched his career as a biology teacher at La Follette High School. He served in several roles within the district, including Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Schools. And most recently, Dr. Gothard served for 7 years as a superintendent at the St. Paul Public Schools in Minnesota. He was named the 2024 Minnesota Superintendent of the Year and went on to be honored as the Superintendents Association's National Superintendent of the Year in 2024. He's been recognized with numerous awards, including one from Junior Achievement in the North Hall of Fame, the Minnesota Association of School Administrators Award, the MMSD Commitment to Diversity Award. He earned his bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degrees from Edgewood College. where he also now sits on the Board of Trustees. So welcome, Dr. Gothard.
Sorry about that, Zach. Great to see you. Thank you for having me.
You too. I'm glad you're here with us. I think, one of the things that I find surprising is that people didn't realize, certainly the first time we crossed paths was when you were as an assistant superintendent. So you're about a year in now, right? About almost a full year on the job. What brought you back here? I mean, obviously this has been a place of childhood and of personal and professional growth, but then you've gone on and we're doing big things, great things, other places. What drew you back here?
I think there were a number of factors, but my favorite word is serendipity a little bit. But I'll start with this. St. Paul Public Schools is in the Council of Great City Schools. That's an organization of the 78 largest urban districts around the country. And from 2020 until last year, I had moved from being a very junior superintendent of that list of 78 to the third longest sitting superintendent in the country. What urban superintendents endured, what most superintendents, what many of us endured during the pandemic, was really hard and challenging, and decisions had to be made that many times did not earn you popularity in your community, your school, your city, your constituency. So a little bit of that I felt that after 7 years, some really good foundations have been laid, but I think it was time. It was time for me on my own terms to express the ability to maybe look for that next spot. But it just so happens that Dr. Carlton Jenkins, who I've known for 20 years, February before, retired from MMSD, and it caught me way off guard. Of course, somewhere in my mind was always, wouldn't it be great to end up in Madison someday? But it wasn't like front and center. Dr. Jenkins had just gotten here during the pandemic. I mean, I didn't see it as a possibility. And I'll never forget asking my wife on that day, Madison's open. And we just kind of looked at each other and shook our heads. But then we took a trip down here over the 4th of July weekend. We didn't tell any family or friends, just her and I. Stayed at the concourse and just did everything we love in Madison, just the two of us. It was pretty clear halfway through the trip, it didn't hurt that it was 75 and beautiful the whole weekend. It was pretty clear that it was the right time. That opportunity and just the serendipity of it, that it happened when it happened, I think just led to me doing that. And I'll say just a couple other things about it. I did not inform anybody that I was applying. I know Madison, I know how Madison works, and I know you start making those kinds of that kind of networking, how things turn out. So there were a very few people who I just kind of tested a little bit and, just asked them about the job, but it was very much, I applied just like anybody else in this country. And I wanted this board to hire me to come back, and I wanted them to really feel good about that choice. So that's what brought me back. My kids are also out of the house. They're professionals in the Twin Cities, daughter living in Northeast Minneapolis, and son and daughter living in St. Paul. So they're at the stage of life where it's just Mary, my wife, and I back, and it made it a little less complex than other moves we've made.
Well, I certainly are glad that you both came back on a 75-degree day and said, this is everything that we miss and love. I think I may have told you the story before, if not, but I'll certainly share it with the audience. When I had heard that you had put your name in, and there certainly was some excitement, once the paper is released, who was in it. I went back and searched in our files for just whatever the interactions that we had with you. And my predecessor, Jennifer Alexander, who came to the chamber by way of state government, but before that was an educator, was a superintendent. I found a letter that she had written to encourage you to consider and take the superintendent job way back before you had left for St. Paul. And so some pretty great foresight on her part to see who you were then. But thankfully you found your way back here. I'm curious if you think about that vantage point of the assistant superintendent role that you had here. Obviously you were well steeped in the high schools and what was going on. But now that you're back in 1 year in, what surprised you the most from where you were then and what you knew of Madison to what you know now of Madison?
Yeah, it's great. I started last May, as you mentioned, and The other two times I've transitioned as a superintendent, there's this very public plan of getting to schools and kind of going through the routine of that transition. I didn't have the luxury of doing that this year because we had two budgets, one if a referendum passed, one if it didn't. And we had a referendum to get questions through the board, to get them to the community, and to make sure that we were equipped on November 4th to give our community the most informed choice possible. And I'm very grateful for the success of both of our referendum questions. So I'm now doing that. So I've been in probably 20 schools. I have a 2-hour structured visit where I meet with students, I meet with the principal, and I meet with staff who are able to arrange their day. And I have to tell you that I had some bias going into it because, like you said, I know Madison well. I know many of I know staff in every building in some way, shape, or form. A former student, probably not any former teachers, but I feel very connected. But I've left every single one of those visits with so much new knowledge about what it's like to be a teacher or a student or a parent or an SEA or a child with disabilities or a child who doesn't know any English. Just such a new appreciation. And it has changed in many ways, just in terms of some of the needs that continue to really need our focused effort to be addressed. So I think those are some of the largest changes. Certainly, the demographic, our city looks different than it did 12 years ago. I can't deny that. I can see it in numbers, but I can experience it in our schools as well. And lastly, I'll say, and again, thankful for the referendum passing, you go into our high schools and see what a modern, updated, future-focused learning environment looks like, and knowing that we're doing that for 10 more schools. Many of our schools are tired and they need our attention and work. And we'll get through them little by little, but those are some of the biggest things that I've noticed. Madison is still very much a neighborhood attendance area school district. And we can talk about that with some future a little bit about, is that the best? Does that serve us all the very best way today?
When you said, based on the success you've had professionally and certainly some of the groups that you belong to nationally with your peers, you get to sit in rooms with many of the best of your peers and see and hear about what's going on elsewhere in the country. Are there places where you feel like the Madison School District stands out compared to peers, or things that you've experienced in being here versus other places where you think this is one of our competitive advantages? This is something that we do better than others that I've seen or heard.
Without a doubt, when I just got back from our national conference a few weeks ago, and when people ask, how's it going? And I say that we passed 2 referendum questions, 70% margins, their eyes that tells you about the support for education in Madison that's been here for a long time. And I think that stands out. Having, looking at the university, today I'm watching, just for all of you that are here, it's state tournament. So I've got a sea of green and a sea of red. Altamont is one of them, I know, but there's just nothing like the excitement of this city, certainly March Madness, but on any other day, in terms of what it feels like to be a resident of this city, and certainly the leader of this city, and watching the tremendous potential that we have. So I've been very unabashed about me noticing these differences in Madison. And I know we may talk about future growth and future opportunities, but it isn't lost on me at all that we're at a really historic time in MMSD and Madison right now. This city, this region is a destination, has long been a destination, but it's an exponential destination right now. And our school district has to be ready for that challenge. Some might run away from that or not want to engage and embrace that. I'm just the opposite. I want to find out how to do it the best. So Zach, those connections with other cities like Austin, like some of my other peers that are experiencing that kind of growth, have been relationships that I've sought out. Wilmington, North Carolina, I just read about is seeing incredible growth. Why wouldn't I reach out to their school district leaders and find out, how are you, doing this work? And because I have been able to network nationally, it's just a really comfortable place for me to be, of knowing who to reach out to and organizations that can help that as well.
I guess as an extension of that conversation about the connectivity that you have nationally and professionally, and some insight to what you're hearing, how has public education evolved since the pandemic? You referenced the pandemic as a point in time where a lot has changed. But as you think about the evolution of like, what is the lasting impact of the pandemic moving forward? What are those things that you see from an evolutionary standpoint?
I think right now what comes to mind, again, just coming out of a 2-hour visit at Thoreau Elementary yesterday, I've got Emerson and Albion tomorrow, is, we used to do student voice, to say we did student voice, maybe a little bit of checkbox, or because, you had students that were really interested in a particular topic. Now it is an absolute must that we're centering our communities on student voice and how they experience school. And it isn't just high school students. It's not just middle school once in a while. When I spend time with our K-5 students and ask them what their school experience is like, I get more information than I ever would have thought of in terms of how they can articulate how they feel to be a member of their school community, their classroom, what learning feels like, what success is to them. By the way, I had that once say, when I get exceeds standards on my standardized test, that doesn't come to mind for them. What comes to mind for them is how they're treated by a peer in the classroom, or that the teacher recognized a special day that they're having in their life or their family. Those kinds of interactions and relationships, I think, are really important. And if we don't get to know our students and want to build this personalized, individualized, relevant educational journey with them, embracing who they are as unique individuals, perhaps we're missing out on the greatest opportunity we have to truly propel this next generation.
You referenced the facilities and operating referenda that passed in November as one of the things that you see as differentiator. Could you just kind of quickly recap for the viewers, some who may live in Greater Madison but don't actually live in the city, so didn't vote for it? Just what did those facility and operating referenda mean for the future?
Yeah. In the state of Wisconsin, we're funded predominantly by local property taxes. 60% or so of our revenue comes from local property taxes. And it does that because there's been a cap on the state imposed revenue limits that school districts can receive and exceed that maximum amount. We get about $27 million from the federal government. We can talk about that in a bit because I know that figure very closely because we're tracking it closely right now. And the rest comes from the state. And our schools have been underfunded for 20 years in two predominant ways. One is we have not increased with the rate of inflation. So school districts in Wisconsin have been behind. Madison is no different than Verona or Middleton or Elkmont, who I just mentioned. But the other way is this, that the federal government made IDEA, the Individual Disability Education Act, law in 1974, and said that they were going to fund and reimburse states up to 40%. Well, the fact is they've never hit 40%. It's more like 10%. States are to make up the rest of that. But for MMSD, it's left a huge gap in terms of what we receive in reimbursement and the amount that we have to transfer from our general fund into our special education or Fund 27 to cover those costs. That amount is $66 million this year. It's just grown over time. So it's one of the advocacy things that we've asked for. So the operating question, back to that, was to allow us to exceed the revenue cap limits by $100 million over 4 years. So we'll raise 30 million additional this year, 30 million additional following year, and then 20 million, and then 20 million. So that's money that we will collect from our local property taxpayers so that we can begin to address some of those gaps. So that's on the operating side. The facility side is this. Some of our schools are, nearing 60 plus years old, and they've not been modernized at all. And I think many in Madison know that now because of the great work from the 2020 referendum that we did at our high schools, in Capitol High School and Southside Elementary. Those are modern, updated facilities with air conditioning and safe and secured buffered entrances and all the things that if we were to build brand new schools today, we would include. In the 1960s, not so much. You might have an office that's in the middle of LaFollette High School. So someone's coming in and you say, what can I help you with today? And they're walking through, hallways all over the place, just trying to find the office, let alone do I understand if they're there for the right reason or not. So those are things that we want to address in a way that our community can get behind. We know that we can't improve all those facilities at the same time, but we can do 10. And that's what we asked the community for, $507 million to completely rebuild 10 of our facilities. Three of them are shared sites, so an elementary and a middle together. And we'll provide them ample space to have two distinct campuses, but there's also some economy of scale that we can also achieve by having those shared campuses still. So $507 million, and we've got our projects phased out. We've chosen Vogel Brothers and Findorf to be both of our construction managers. We're working with OPN as our architect and engineers, and Concord is the project managers who are helping us organize these really complex jobs to get them done on time and at or under budget.
Oh, we're glad OPN, Vogel, and Findorf are helping do it. They're all great chamber members. So
Yep.
Glad to see them chosen. As you noted, they all passed, both the 2020 referenda and these last two passed by wide margins. I guess I have a question for you. If you looked into the crystal ball, I've heard two phrases used increasingly. One is referenda addiction. The other one is referenda fatigue, right? And those things could run headlong into each other. Do you think that school districts, not just MMSD, but school districts writ large in Wisconsin, going to referendum is sustainable?
I think we have to ask why. And I think if we ask why, I named two pretty important factors of it. The special education gap for school districts in the state of Wisconsin is 1.8 billion with a B billion dollars. So for districts, in order to make up for some of that, cost, that reimbursement that they've lost, there's no other choice. They're shuttering schools, or we can no longer use transportation. I mean, these are services that are so key and crucial to school districts. The decisions that are left with cutting for financial reasons are just not possible. And I think the other thing that might surprise you is, in Minnesota, we're funded about 60% from local property taxes here. It's just the opposite in Minnesota. St. Paul, I think, was maybe 23% of our revenue came from local property taxes. The rest came from the state, very little from federal government, about 10% again. So it's kind of flipped here. That was a little bit of a surprise. Maybe I just didn't pay attention to it in my previous roles here, but definitely a big surprise. And I think tells you why there are so many referenda here, because of the very small portion that the state funds and the very large that we rely on property taxes.
Yeah, I just saw a number. I think it was 92 currently between January and now. So both the February and the April spring elections, like 92 referenda. It's a sort of shocking amount, and it'll be interesting to see where the fatigue of the voter and the will of the state legislature, those things can hit timing wise, so that it doesn't impact the schools. Are there needs that are? Go ahead. Sorry.
If I could, Zach, on that, I just spent the Wisconsin Association of School Boards Day at the Capitol last week or the week before. I don't know, they're all blending. But, we had a bipartisan panel on the stage, and the discussion about special education reimbursement to districts came up. And out of each of their mouths, it was something that is supported because they're hearing it. Because what you just posed to me, why so many referenda, is a conversation happening throughout the state. And I think for the legislature to come together and find something, right now we're funded at 30% from the state. Dr. Underly asked for 90%. Governor Evers asked for 60%. I'm asking for it to be fully funded. This is a right that our children have. It's a civil right that our children have. And we value it in Madison. Madison has long been an inclusive educational institution for children of diverse needs. And it's something that I want to make sure that we're doing the right way, but we also need proper funding to maintain that.
What needs still have to be addressed? What's still left after the execution of these referendum? What's left? What's still on the table?
The state passed Act 20. Minnesota was the READ Act. It's Act 20 here. And that is the adoption of the science of reading as a process and a learning that the teachers must have in order to deliver better literacy instruction in the classroom, and especially focused on our youngest learners. And it makes sense, right? I mean, we know that children who learn early, learn well, are going to have a better trajectory than those who begin with gaps and continue to exacerbate gaps in their primary years. And I think that that's probably the biggest, the loudest right now. And it's not just after the pandemic. I think the pandemic heightened it because I think there was a focused attention on the learning gaps, the learning loss that children experienced during the pandemic. But we have to be honest, and I have to be honest as a system leader to know that the literacy rates, and especially for Black children, children of disabilities, American Indian children throughout our country have long been overlooked, and children have been underserved. So I think that's one area that, I think we're getting better. We have new curriculum. We have trained our teachers, but it's going to take focused effort. It's going to take looking for some innovative ways to make sure that children are getting the very best to learning to read and becoming independent learners, independent readers as they grow through our system. To me, it's the most urgent need we have.
So you've making your way through the high school remodel and improvements. You've have the middle schools on deck. What's left? I mean, when you think about facility upgrades, regardless of how we fund it right now, so not asking you to sort of guess how it gets funded, but what's left on the horizon from a facility standpoint?
So here's the thing on this. We talk about a rapidly changing political environment right now. I've been sorry about this, everyone. I tried to avoid all the respiratory stuff and thought I was good, and I think it's just catching me. But we've tried to, the rapid way that the political environment is happening right now. I've said many times, hit your refresher on your browser, and that's the news cycle. Our city is kind of the same way, not politically, but in terms of development. So I'm learning all the time about how this city is changing, and it impacts me because my job is to make sure I know where our children are, know where they go to school, and know that they have what they need to be successful. And I'll give one example, but this is repeat. I could give this several times over the past several weeks. I'm sitting on my couch on a Saturday morning, open up my Madison.com, a digital copy, and there I see the Ramish farm parcel that's been approved for development. And it is right next to Lakeview Elementary School. 900 units, beautiful rolling hills. Many of you on this call likely know exactly what I'm talking about, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that that was in discussion. And, we've got Lakeview Elementary, we have Gompers and Blackhawk. Now, thankfully, Gompers and Blackhawk are on the list. They're the second, site to be developed and to be redeveloped. And it gives us time to pause and think, how might this new development, whenever it happens, how might that impact the future of this school? So in terms of where students are going to be is one part of it. But for me, it's not only where our students, it's also ensuring that no matter where students are, we know that we can provide them an exceptional, relevant, meaningful education. And when we start to look at what we've done at the high school, I've had middle school students ask me, because they see their brothers and sisters at these new schools, these new developed high schools, and they wonder, where's my opportunity here? I want to do some of that as well. And we have not done a great enough job in our middle school rotation of giving students that exposure necessary so that we can really have the seamless kind of transition I'm looking for as our middle school students transition into high school. And to me, this isn't about choosing a major. To me, I want diagonal articulation. Students should be able to try welding and culinary and engineering. They should be able to try it all with no penalty and making progress towards graduation. And I just think that there's such a ripe opportunity. Zach, you and I and others on this call have talked about this. And it's one of my most, in addition to literacy, it's one of my most other urgent things that's on my mind about creating the future workforce.
I got asked a question during both of the most recent referenda cycles about school capacities, which schools were at capacity, which schools weren't. And the question was posed to me, not as an expert, but as somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about our growth and the economy. shouldn't closing schools be on the table at some point? And I responded without really any knowledge of what would be on the table, just saying growing cities don't close schools. So I just made a blanket statement. I got a little bit of blowback from that, where people were like, well, I don't know if that's true. And I heard it come up again in the last referendum cycle where people were saying, well, why this and why that? And some of that was decisions were made before you got here. But would closing schools be on the table at some point, even if the region and the city and the district are growing?
Yes. If we have to look at declining enrollment and declining funding, and it becomes we have to do it, it should, but that would be the case. I've closed schools before. I closed 6 schools in St. Paul. I know what that process does, and even though St. Paul's seeing an enrollment increase this year for different reasons, it's not something I wish on anyone. But I want you all to know this as well. 2 years ago, this Board of Education in Madison made the decision that they were going to focus small class sizes at the K-1 level, right? They were going to go down to 15 students in kindergarten and first grade. A lot of it aligned to the literacy work, which is fantastic. To think about the individual attention you can provide each child in a smaller environment is great. But what that did is it added 47 sections to the school district. So capacity before 2 years ago was different than it is today. Anytime you look at changing class size and putting caps on class sizes, it spreads you out. Buildings are utilized today, and that's the other word, Zach. It isn't just capacity, it's how buildings are used too. If you look at how we've created flex space or maker spaces or fab labs or intervention space, we have more children today who might be coming and speak a language other than Spanish, and they may need a very small area for the services that they deserve. So we're using our buildings differently today than before as well. And capacity is one measure, but utilization is also something that I am focusing on, how we use our buildings.
Okay, need you to suspend disbelief for a second. And I know this is not, so I'm going to put a big asterisk. I know this is not the case. But we've talked about what you would do with the money that you have been given by the community. We've talked about where the money doesn't necessarily exist today, but in a world where there were no financial considerations, like that you as superintendent could do whatever you wanted, what would your top priorities be for the district?
So top priorities would be elevating all of our facilities, making sure that students had just a well-functioning building every day. I would probably add transportation. Right now, we have, in some places in our city, we have a really hard time for consistent attendance. And when I break it down with staff, this is one of the questions I have. It really is, Joe, they're outside of the 1.5 mile radius, but there are situations in either living areas or regions that just don't make it feasible for them to walk. Parents are working or any number of things. And it's really hard for me to hear that, knowing that I'm the person that makes these recommendations. Am I contributing to this? So I would probably make sure that every child had a safe and consistent ride to school every day. That would be something. It would cost millions, but that's what I would do. I would also look for ways that we could have a more seamless partnership with our business, 2- and 4-year trades, all of those organizations where we didn't look at where students are in terms of the funding that we receive. We looked at where students are for truly what they need. Now, we do that within state statute guidelines, of course, for legal reasons, for graduation requirements. But to me, in 2025, on the back end of the baby boomers and the need for a workforce to be elevated, it's shocking to me that state leaders aren't bringing that to me to say, hey, we have to look at the way we do school different instead of putting students in 7 periods a day, the whole conveyor belt model of education. There should be many more ways that we're serving students right now. And truthfully, they should be doing it in the community. And that doesn't mean that students are working at a job they're going to have the rest of their lives or, any of that, but it should be that kind of exposure, that kind of experiential learning. And it shouldn't be just reserved for some students. It should really be written into law in the way that, that we do things. And we're so fortunate in Madison to have the infrastructure to deliver on that too.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought it up because I think it's a place I wanted this conversation to go. About the intersection between business, workforce, and the schools, right? The supply demand equation between the three. I will say, you don't have to agree or disagree, but I will say I believe the formal relationship between the schools and the business community has diminished over time. I would say it was higher when you were here before. I think it got higher and then it fell off. And when you came back, maybe at its lowest point. So nothing you've done. But as you look out and we start to talk, and you and I've talked a number of times about what does that look like in the future? But I'm curious to your take for this audience. What do you see as the business community's role in public education going forward?
Well, one, we need to make it easier is the wrong word. We need to establish better communication, better relationships. I'm not ready to share the details of it, but I'm reorganizing how we're situated here, and it's going to be around strategic direction and strategic partnership. I want to make sure that when I'm talking to you and others, that it's very much related to, common strategic goals that we each have as our organizations, and that we're really focusing and building to fidelity those partnerships. So that's one area. But I think from the business community, I've always believed this. As the principal of Gothard High School, I thought for sure that I just opened the doors and in come the partners. That didn't work so well. Then I learned that you invite a bunch of people in, and it's nice to meet them, but you don't have any specific asks or goals. Strike two. The best partnerships I had is when you find somebody that has a common purpose and what you want to achieve. You sit down and you really work hard to develop those common goals. But the most important part of it is this: to come back regularly and evaluate how you're doing. Are you meeting the goals? And I've had to back away from partnerships, and I've had business community have to back away from partnerships because that wasn't taking place. We have a limited number of dollars, a limited amount of time. I mean, the impact is so important to me that we have to focus on what's working well and make sure that we have the discipline and system built into it so we can ensure, that we're doing, consistently a great job. I think I saw Michael Johnson, for example, yesterday or this week. There was an Avid celebration. Avid Tops, I think, is 15 years. I remember when it was created. And that's the kind of discipline for a long-lasting partnership, to be able to have data that's empirical, where you can say this is making a difference. That's one model that's worked really well, but I could talk about dozens of others that haven't.
Yeah, let me ask you about one. The chamber was an anchor and founding partner in Personalized Pathways, right? It was
Yep.
Not only just founded it, but this organization rarely raises money for others, right? It's not our job, right? Like, our board is very clear to us. This is a place where we raise significant dollars to launch the Personalized Pathways. And as you noted, the Boys and Girls Club, there seems to be a remaining appetite for this, school to job, school to college pipeline. How do you view the current status of pathways, either the Personalized Pathways of before or the future of pathways? And then are there changes you would like to make it more relevant, more vigorous, more impactful for students?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think right now, in fact, I'm leaving this call for our first meeting with, the Mackenzie Foundation to talk about some of these next steps that we want to mutually, do some work together. But I think that, pathways, at least my perception a bit, Zach, is that it kind of got branded. And I'm not saying by you or others, but I think district a little bit, where it really became more about kind of the structure and less about the outcomes that we wanted to create. I want students to have experiences anywhere, anytime, and anything that they have passion about. And I think we have to just sometimes back away from the rigidity of how school has always worked and be able to take some risk on that. As long as it's good for kids, healthy for kids, we can, make sure that there's support there. And, we just have to look for opportunities like that. We have hundreds of students in early youth apprenticeships at Madison College, and we're expanding it next year. I think we have 4 more that are piloting in things like cybersecurity and STEM. And they're proven to be really popular. And I think some of the argument is that it takes students out of their high school. So here's my challenge for the community. help me build a system where we can have some of that capacity at our schools so that students don't lose their school identity as part of this. There's kind of a both and. There's an opportunity for both models to work instead of just one. Why would we limit ourselves to one way? Education for too long has been one way. And let's come up with different ways to do this where there aren't haves and have-nots.
So on that innovation thread, just to pull that a little bit more, you're thinking about innovation. One of your predecessors, Jen Cheatham, was never shy of asking the private sector to underwrite innovation. And I would argue had tremendous success, more success than I have seen from other superintendents. As you think about now you're coming up on this end of the first year, you've got, legacy pandemic issues, you've got facility, you've got a lot that you've had to wrangle to the ground in 12 months. But as you start thinking about this innovation and the places where you want to drive innovation, are there specific places where the business community can understand from you, where would you want to see private sector investment in the innovation space? What would that look like?
Yeah, I think right now, me as the superintendent, I'm building relationships or rekindling relationships that I had. We're in the strategic planning process right now. We're very close to having the board somewhat approve a foundation or kind of a framework. But the work of creating the objectives and the strategies and working with the community, working with business community is still ahead of us. So I think that's work that will be ongoing. But I would very much like to have my references filled with this work and what I'm learning from our community right now, what opportunities that we have right before us.
Yeah. I'm going to speed these up because we have 3 minutes and I have 3 questions I really want to get to. Late last year, we launched a new talent recruitment video called Wayfarers. You were one of the first organizations to adopt it. A lot of others have joined your ranks, and we're getting a lot of great traffic from it. You even embedded it in your website. And I think we'll put that in the chat for you too, for people who want to see that video. If you want to embed it like MMSD, just reach out to us. We'll certainly help you with the codes. But what does talent recruitment look like right now for MMSD? As you're thinking about the future talent inside the building, not the student talent, but the teacher talent, what does that look like?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, the dynamic workforce, all of us know that, but I'm feeling better about it than the last 5 years. This year, that's for sure. We just made some staffing adjustments, and people are really upset about it. And it's hard. They really like it. They want to stay at their school. They want to stay in their jobs. So those are healthy signs. Unfortunately, we have to make some adjustments. But I think that Madison again is at that place right now where there is excitement here, and I want people to know that it's our chance to truly embrace and bring people here. The video is fantastic. I saw it at, I think, Rotary or maybe one other time. I brought it right back to our team and I said, get this on our website now.
There's so many questions I want to ask you. We have no time. We have to have you back on because I want to talk to you about police and school. I want to talk to you about DEI projects. I want to talk to you about how we multiply GDP by educating kids in different spaces. But maybe the question I'll end on is, we convened a panel last year about challenges and policy implications of AI and artificial intelligence. What do you think the opportunities and risks are from AI when it comes to K-12 education?
Opportunities are clearly there. I mean, just to have another voice, sometimes perhaps you've heard in education that sometimes shy students don't like to speak up or ask questions. For students to have an outlet, to have another source of information. We won't talk about the relevancy of the information, but it's a place. The challenges of it, of course, are legislating or supervising, that kind of use. Is it real? Is it not? How are we going through it and making sure that it's sourced correctly? I ask students, quite frankly, do you use AI? All their hands go up. How do you use it? I probably shouldn't repeat how some of them use it, but they're very open with me. And I don't think there are things, the norms of education that are conformed with that. So we've got to wrestle with that a little bit because the days of students not having information at their fingertips have been gone for 20 years. Sometimes we still think we're in the World Book Encyclopedia age.
All right, Dr. Gothard, let's have you on again. And then next time we will start with where we left off and look to the future as opposed to talking about the present. You know how much I think of you and appreciate that you have brought your talents, wisdom, and family back to Madison. So Thank you for choosing us. I'm glad we chose you. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today on Lunch Update. Certainly thank our presenting sponsor, Perkins Coie, for supporting it. And we'll see you all next time. And at a date in the future, we will have Dr. Gothard back on to talk about the future of where we go from here. So have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks, everyone.